So hi everyone, this is Deacon Chris. One of the things that we have been thinking about in our time apart from one another is this whole idea of how do we worship when we're alone. And so I wanted to take some time and maybe develop a little bit of a formation ministry for you and really spend some time with you helping you to understand in the Episcopal Church traditions what it is that we look for. So with that, I'm going to take my handy Book of Common Prayer. Now, if you don't happen to have one of these in your own home, totally fine. There is a bcponline.org, and I will put that in the notes below. But what we're going to do is basically each time I put a video up, we're going to spend about 5 minutes, not terribly long, looking at something that's in here for how we could be worshiping when we're worshiping apart. So, for today's lesson, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the calendar. You know how we always seem to have some place where we are coming up with these readings for every single week? Well, it seems like a lot of us don't really know where that comes from. So if you grab a Book of Common Prayer, you can actually go to the back, and there's a whole section in it called the Lectionary. So what do you do with a lectionary? Well, a lectionary runs on the Christian calendar, and we are currently operating in year A. Just so you know, year A is where we are right now. The year begins when we are starting with Advent. So our Christian year starts a little bit before the calendar year. It actually starts usually the weekend right after Thanksgiving. But we have that beginning of Advent, and then we go through Advent. We have Christmas and Christmastide, and we have several seasons. We have Lent. We've just had Easter. So right now, the season that we find ourselves in is Easter, okay? Or sometimes we call it Eastertide if we're being really formal. So if you flip in here to Easter, which you will find Easter for year A begins on page 893. And so we had Easter Sunday, and we've already had one Sunday past Easter, so we call that the second Sunday of Easter. So we are just coming up on the third Sunday of Easter, which you would find that on page 894. And if you look there, you will see, it'll tell you what the psalm is, which coming up this week, it's going to be Psalm 116, 1 through 3, and then 10 through 17. And then our readings, we usually have a New Testament reading, an Old Testament reading, and then our Gospel reading. So our readings this week are going to be Acts 2, 14a, 36 through 41, 1 Peter, chapter 1, verses 17 through 23, and then Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 through 35. So I hope that this very brief explanation has helped you to figure out where you are in terms of praying. So when we get to the Sunday sermon this week and when we get to the gospel reading this week, that's where those are going to come from. And like I said, we're on page 894. Next week we'll be on page 895 with the fourth Sunday of Easter. Now, that's what we do for Sundays. What do you do if you are looking for not Sundays? What if it's a Tuesday? What do you do then? Well, it turns out that there is a whole nother lectionary that comes just a few pages later, and it's called the Daily Office Lectionary. It actually starts, see right here, it says Daily Office Lectionary. You can find it pretty easily. And that Daily Office Lectionary starts on page 934. And just like the other one, we have multiple years. It's just so that people don't get bored and they read through more of the Bible over time. And so if you're looking at this, again, we start with the season of Advent, and we are, as I said, in the second week following Easter. So we'll just turn a few pages here. And we had week 2 of Easter is where we are right now. And so that begins on page 958, and you can take a look and you'll see that again there are psalms that are listed there. That's the first line, and then there are 3 readings for every single day. Now, don't get overly worried about this. You don't have to read every single reading every single day. Some people like to do the psalm plus one particular reading and follow through a series. Some people like to do the psalm, one reading, and a gospel. Some people like to do all three. Some people do one reading and a gospel in the morning and the other reading in the evening. Whatever works for you. Don't feel like you have to do too much. It's just a way to have a rule of life. And really, rule of life is just about developing habits. So don't think of those rules as being things like, oh, I have to do this or I'm a bad Christian. No, that's not the case. They're just habits that we're forming for ourselves. And then when we don't do them, that's the exception to the rule. It's the time that we just kind of fell out of the habit, but we can just go right back to the rule whenever we're ready. So that is how you can use your Book of Common Prayer to find where we are in terms of readings and in terms of what you can do. And that has been your little bit of formation for this week. Take care. We'll have more coming up.